Hello and welcome to the Society with Fatma Shaheen at PTB World. Today on our show, we'll be talking about the educational emergency which has been declared by the Prime Minister of Pakistan, and there onwards we'll also be delving upon the formulation of this recent education task force in this regard too, which has been entrusted with the job of addressing this national emergency. Having said that, it's very important to then mention the very simple fact, which is that this emergency should just not be seen as a mechanism so as to address Pakistan's current educational issues, but also a very effective way so as to reform our education landscape too. Having said that, we'll also be talking about not one, rather various problems that Pakistan's current educational system is then faced with, be it that of the growing number of out-of-school children, be it that relating to significant disparities which then do exist with regards to access to education, especially in the remote and the rural parts of the country, so to speak. We'll also be talking about the right of the girl child to seek an education in this regard too, and also of course of differently abled persons and the trans community too. Overall, we'll also be talking about the education policies in this regard too, and also why is it so important at a very basic and core level for us to not only involve parents but the community at large as well, if we are serious in, of course, overall aiming to improve both the quality as well as the level of accessibility of education in the country. All of this today, that too with an extremely pertinent panel. Let me introduce you to my today's panel. My first panelist for today's show is Ms. Fakhra Shahid. She is a senior educationist. Assalamu alaikum ji and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us, madam. Alongside her, I have Ms. Mehreen Noor. She is a senior educationist too. Assalamu alaikum ji and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. My third panelist via telephone line is Javed Ahmed Malik Saab, who is currently a member of the Prime Minister's Task Force on Education, and he's also been the former lead advisor for Punjab education sector reforms. Assalamu alaikum sir and welcome to the show.
Thank you Fatma for having me.
And we'll also be joined remotely via telephone line by Suhail bin Aziz Saab, who is an educationist alongside being the former Assistant Education Advisor, National Curriculum Council, Ministry of Federal Education. Assalamu alaikum sir and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for inviting me to the program.
Now, before we start the discussion on today's topic, let's have a look at this brief report.
In response to growing concerns about educational disparities and declining academic standards, the government launched the education emergency to ensure every child has access to quality education. This initiative demonstrates the government's commitment to addressing critical gaps and elevating the overall educational experience for students nationwide. The task force dedicated to this mission under the government's guidance will work diligently to enhance the education system by implementing innovative teaching methods, upgrading school infrastructure, and providing continuous professional development for educators. Their efforts are set to foster a more engaging and effective learning environment. To make education more inclusive and accessible, the government is breaking down barriers such as socio-economic status, geographic location, and disabilities. By implementing inclusive policies, providing financial assistance, and ensuring schools are equipped to accommodate diverse learning needs, we can create an equitable educational landscape for all students. Improving access to education is a priority, and the government is expanding early childhood education programs, ensuring safe and reliable transportation, and building more schools in underdeserved areas. These measures will help ensure that every child can attend school and receive a quality education. The importance of technology and digital resources in modernizing our education system is a key focus of government's strategy. Utilizing digital tools and online platforms enhances learning experiences, offers personalized education paths, and connects students with a wealth of information and resources. Embracing technology prepares students for a rapidly evolving world and ensures they possess the skills needed for future success. In conclusion, by addressing these critical areas with the government's proactive involvement, we can create a brighter, more equitable future for education, ensuring every child has the opportunity to succeed.
Welcome back from the report. Now to get the conversation started with you, Javed Saab, my first question to you would be that we understand the fact recently an education emergency has been declared by the Prime Minister of Pakistan, and of course consequent to that we do now see recently this member task force on education being formulated as well, of which of course you are a prominent member too. Having said that, when we do talk about particularly the working of this task force, can you please tell us what kind of a portfolio do all the members have, because we do understand that they all come with a diverse portfolio, so to speak, and what is that task with which they are interested with so as to overall improve the quality of education in the country?
Thank you, Fatma, for having me. We all know that Pakistan is passing through a major educational crisis. The report which Pakistan Institute of Education launched, a few months back from the Federal Ministry, it already estimated that 26 million children are out of school, which actually makes us the largest, number of children out of school residing in Pakistan, which is, I think, is a national shame and a national crisis. And the other 40 to 50 million children who are in school, 70% are not learning enough. So therefore, the overall education system, whether it's public or private, is not able to fully respond to the challenge. And it means that it's not a business as usual, and you need to do something extraordinary to overcome that. Before the election, many of the civil society organizations, Education Champions Network, leading NGOs, public policy specialists, others, they were already working on, some kind of charter for demand which political parties could adopt for education. So there's already this was ripe, and right after the election, the new government came in for 100 days. These advocacy organizations, along with the very kind of reformist Federal Secretary Muhyiddin Wani, they worked together with the Prime Minister's office to come up with a new deal on education, which is Education Emergency, with Prime Minister announced on 8th of May. It actually establishes and promises that Prime Minister and Pakistan and the provinces and the entire system would actually now work at a very different pace to address this challenge. Along with the education emergency announcement, there are roughly 14 measures which the Prime Minister announced, including establishment of out-of-school children fund, National Disaster Response Fund, Wasila Taaleem Fund, Pakistan Education Endowment Fund. These four kind of funds, and then also a national level task force. Also commitment that the education expenditure will be 4% of the GDP. The combination of these measures, these are all actually meant to then push the system to respond at a very different level. And the national task force, which is announced very recently, consists of eminent public policy specialists, implementers, organizations, and reformers to assist the Prime Minister of Pakistan to oversee this agenda.
That's very rightly put by yourself, sir, and it's also very pertinent to mention in this context then that we do understand that the Prime Minister himself will be the chairperson of this very educational task force too. But moving on, we do appreciate this very simple fact that this is in itself an extremely commendable initiative, and we do also expect the fact this will have a positive trickle-down effect so as to overall improve the educational landscape in the country. What do you feel would be that one distinguishing factor of this very educational task force, if we make a comparison of it with those that we've had before, because we also understand the fact that there have been not one, rather various such task forces established before as well?
Fatma, you're right. This is not new. Many task force and commissions announced before also, and Pakistan consistently hasn't been living up to its expectations. So therefore, you are right to ask that why this time it will be different. And I would actually be very blunt in saying that it can only be different if we are able to focus on the implementation. And therefore, the task force should not be about just discussing proposals. It should be about overseeing the progress. I mean, after all, we now have plenty of research and plenty of solutions and established success stories which actually can allow us to push for better. And therefore, it's a real test for us, all of us actually, and the Prime Minister to work together to push the federal government and the four provincial governments, as well as Gilgit and Kashmir, and the private sector, the NGOs, that we actually should focus entirely on removing learning poverty from schools, expanding, for example, rapid measures like public-private partnership to bring children back to school system, and focus on, especially girls, adolescent girls who are, especially in 40, bottom districts, they are out of school, facing multiple discriminations. They should be focused and should be brought to school. So, the challenges are way more than the opportunities. But I'm guardedly optimistic that after all, with all of this impossible politics and polarization, the Prime Minister and the government still found it right to create a task force which actually is comprising of very eminent professionals.
Right, sir. On which I'll come to you, Ms. Fakhra. I think he's very rightly so mentioned when he says that we should perceive this to be in the way that there are more opportunities as opposed to the challenges. But when we talk about this from the policy view angle, do you feel that at some level, this kind of an educational emergency, it will also give us that right push so as to perhaps better work towards or accelerate a more effective implementation of our current educational policies too?
Agreed, Fatma, because I think we should see this as an opportunity, and the very word emergency declares the intent of making it work and how important it is, and something education has sadly much talked as a priority but has never been set as a priority. So now that there is this opportunity to see it as an emergency and deal with it as an emergency. But having said that, it does not just require a kind of a shock to revive it. It would require intensive and critical planning, strategic planning that has to go. And within that planning, there needs to be mechanism for monitoring and evaluation. Because at the end of the day, for this to be a sustained effort, for this to be scalable, it is necessary that at the planning stage, we have measures put in so that we can actually build in accountability and transparency.
That's so important. And also not only at the planning stage, I believe it's also throughout, madam, because every time you're bringing in a new policy or bringing in new initiatives, you have to sit back, you have to analyze the effectiveness of the same, and then, if needed, change your mode of strategy too. So, Hilsab, I would want you to add to this further, taking on from where Ms. Fakhra left. So, when we do talk about this more particularly with reference to the practical working of this educational task force, what in your opinion would be the most pressing or the glaring challenges that may come in its way, because we do understand education at the end of the day is a provincial subject. So what kind of challenges do you feel would be the most imminent one when it comes to the practical smooth working of this educational task force?
Thank you very much for inviting me to the program, and we are very pleased that this new committee has been formed. The newly formed Task Force on Education by the Prime Minister of Pakistan is indeed a promising initiative to tackle the national education emergency that has recently been announced. However, you're right that there will be several practical challenges it may face in upgrading the educational system to meet modern day requirements. The first and the foremost would be coordination and collaboration with a diverse group of stakeholders, including federal and provincial ministers, international organizations, educational experts. Achieving cohesive and synchronized efforts will be challenging. So clear communication and unified goals are really essential for this. And then if we come to resource allocation, securing sufficient funding and resources is really critical. Efficiently distributing these resources, especially in underserved areas, that requires careful planning and oversight, And then when we talk about infrastructure development, many regions, particularly rural areas, they lack educational infrastructure. So building and upgrading schools, providing access to modern technology, and ensuring basic amenities, that will also be a substantial task. And then, as you know, teachers, they play a key role in uplifting quality of education. So teacher training and its quality is extremely important. We need to enhance quality of education that relies heavily on well-trained teachers. providing comprehensive training programs, fair compensation, and continuous professional development is really crucial.
But in addition to that, do you not feel here that, what is equally important is parental involvement? I would want you to add to that, madam. When we do talk about overall aiming to improve both the access as well as the quality of education being provided, that too as per Article 25A of the Pakistani Constitution, how important is it for us to focus on parental involvement too? Because a lot of times we see, more often than not, especially in the rural areas, girl child particularly might not have that access because the parents feel that it's not important to get the girl educated at the end of the day.
Excess, lack of infrastructure, early child marriage, return to investment, perceived social and religious norms, which the parents think are hindering a girl child to step out of the house. Putting the girl into a situation where they feel there will be security. So, that is where marriage comes into play. But I do know of an incident in one of our neighboring countries where they brought the clergy in to send out this messaging that it was really important that the girls should be married late for their health, for the society, for just the general well-being of the girls.
But also in addition to that, we must just quickly glance through the stats which suggest that in Sindh 52% of the poorest children and 58% of these are school girls. Then in Balochistan 78% of girls are out of school. So the question then is, madam, just not about getting them educated, it is about ensuring that once they do get enrolled in schools, they are not actually pulled out of them, because you see then this is a two-pronged approach. It's just not looking at it from that one single angle. So how do you as an educationist suggest that when it comes to tackling this educational emergency, these are the issues which should be given core importance, core priority?
So again, primarily you get the child into the school, then you ensure that the teaching and learning is of a standard where the parents feel that this activity of sending a girl to a school, because there are lots of parents who actually do want their girls to study. It's not that everybody thinks the same way, and those who do send them, there's a huge fall in girls in the secondary level. This is when they reach puberty and parents start feeling insecure. They also feel that the school is not giving enough in terms of education or learning and teaching, and therefore it's an activity that's being wasted. They'd much rather come home, help the mother, or maybe go and work somewhere.
Right, right, madam. But coming towards you, Ms. Fakhra, here we must also talk about the optimum level of parental involvement too. How particularly as a senior educationist in your own right do you feel can we ensure that, more particularly when the parents themselves are illiterate? Because then you see this is something which perhaps comes to them very naturally. They would not, by virtue of being illiterate, understand the very importance of getting their child educated.
I think I'll touch upon what Mehreen has said, very rightly said over here, is that firstly there needs to be awareness, of course, they need to be made aware and then reassured. You see, the thing is that it is a social dilemma. It is the societal biases, prejudices and this general perception that girl education is now, somehow parents are shamed into it. Okay, so you're sending your child, what if scenarios. To bust those myths, it's important that this is taken up as a national campaign of supporting parents, so that they are reassured that there are mechanisms into place that will enable them to safely and with their peace of mind send their child. And in this regard, I think it is also important that they are also made to be part of their child's learning. So the value of what that learning is bringing to their child. So there is that if we build in that vocational aspect, if we build in that aspect where they are also learning about not just reading and writing, but learning something that makes them viable for the world.
Right.
I think that will give
These
them
are the
that
things
confidence.
that we need to work on.
Absolutely.
But then again, you see, we have to then ensure that the parents themselves, they are equally socially aware this way too, because you can't expect them to pass down these values if they themselves are not educated to start off with. On which I'll come to you, Javed Saab, and I would want you to add to this. So overall, if we are to generally delve upon the progress that Pakistan's educational system or education landscape has made in this regard, what do you feel have been its biggest achievements, more particularly in the past few decades? Because one thing is for sure, and that is that we generally now see more and more younger people entering this sector, foreign qualified too. So do you not feel as an educationist yourself that this has in ways more than one also added a very fresh and dynamic perspective to the education system of the country?
I mean, luckily, Pakistan have done well in the last, 10, 15 years actually in education sector. After 2002, the reform program are much more sophisticated with data systems and targets, they are in place. In Punjab alone, for example, the experience of Punjab Education Foundation, which is now, providing education to 2.3 million children, up from roughly 5 to 600,000 children back in 2008 is a huge success story. This is a public-private sector model which is able to open the school at a very rapid pace and provide education. And I think this government with Rana Sikandar as a Punjab education minister is very focused on expanding the Punjab Education Foundation. Other success is that you use data to monitor progress at system level, and Punjab PMIU, which is Program Management and Implementation Unit, they collect data from each of the school, and at a system level you can monitor them every day, and you can do a lot of things with that data by directing money and expenditure and improving facilities and others.
Right, sir, your point is noted, on which I'll come to you, madam, and I would want you to add to this further in the context of the educational emergency. So overall, when it comes to prioritizing teachers' professional development, how particularly do you feel can we do just that? How do you feel can we then ensure that yes, teacher training is done in a way which is not only uniform, it is standardized, but it is also looking out to the peculiar needs of the children they are expected to teach?
Very rightly pointed out. I think teacher training, again, the quality of education hinges upon the quality of teaching. And then what do we mean about teacher training? I think we need to expand the spectrum of what we mean by what are we training our teachers for. If it is only for subject knowledge, if it is only for pedagogy, I think we will be shortchanging the entire, and then again ending up in the situation that has led to this emergency. So we really need to change the model. We need to be educating and training our teachers, developing, I would use this word instead of training, developing our teachers to understand the bigger picture of what is education that we are providing. So it is not just understanding that what the child has to learn in terms of numbers and literacy, but more so in terms of how is that child developing emotionally, psychologically, and socially.
So the focus should then be more on the skill bit as opposed to just ensuring the child is rote learning. And in this regard, do you not feel that perhaps learning from the other countries, we should also equally focus upon teaching teachers how to deal with conflict and how to deal with displacement? Because we have seen countries like Uganda and South Sudan do just that, because you see, then again, this is an angle for which we need to prepare our teachers too.
Exactly, agreed. You see that when we're talking about 21st century, what are we preparing these children for? So are our teachers who are preparing these children themselves prepared for that? So I think it's gone beyond how well you speak English to how well you can communicate. So it's gone beyond that. And then it's not just about, okay, how well I've done on a particular paper or in a particular assessment, but how well I can collaborate. So the bigger picture, the purpose of education for collaboration, for critical thinking, for creativity, that scope should be built into the curriculum. Teachers need to be trained for that so that they can pass on those very skills and competencies required, like learning to learn rather than just rote learning that's happening. So the teacher training model needs to be revamped, keeping that bigger end in mind.
Right, and of course keeping in mind the respective limitations of the teachers per se too. I'll come to you, Ms. Mary, and I would want you to add to this. But when we talk about overall improving the access of the education system, I think something very important in this regard that we must give due consideration to is the fact that we need to ensure that people have access to digital resources, because technology, we've seen, for example, we did see that in the COVID-19 pandemic, we had tele-schools which played a monumental part with regards to ensuring that people did have access to education. So in this regard, how do you propose can technology then be used in a long-term sustainable manner so as to ensure continuity of education?
That's a great question, Fatma, and COVID was quite an eye-opener for all of us. And the way the tele-school came into place was quickly done, it was effectively done, and it made a difference, I'm sure, to a lot of children. With the advent of AI and artificial intelligence's various scopes and presence in every element, it's important that we stay with that, we stay with the international parameters. Luckily, Pakistan has very intelligent, very good entrepreneurs who have now started technology platforms which are very helpful. So, I can take several names of technology platforms that are doing really well. These platforms have the ability to facilitate examinations, so matriculation, intermediate and BA. They have the ability to teach kids in a fun and interesting way. So, it is not a stick brick and mortar kind of a setup, but it is a very engaging setup, and you know how good children are with technology,
of course,
and how much fun they have.
And it's easier for them to also pick it and absorb it. And
Right.
also in this regard, we have had this digital school on wheels initiative launched by the Honorable Chief Minister Mariam Nawaz Saiba, which actually involves buses being turned into mobile classrooms equipped with computers and internet, so to speak. So I think this in itself is also a great initiative when it comes to expanding, you know, the digital education
very
access,
important, of
and
course.
things like these they should be more welcome that way.
Yeah.
But when it comes to doing away with that digital divide, because then you see this again is a very pressing problem, how particularly do you propose can we do just that?
So, that is happening already. All these, a lot of these technology platforms are partnering with the government. As a matter of fact, one of these very popular ones has partnered with TikTok as well, and they, you know, TikTok wants to clean up their act, and so it's been a great activity, and now they have an educational platform which is actually partnered with an organization in Pakistan. Also, these very organizations have gone into various provinces in the Punjab, and hopefully it will go now to other regions of Pakistan as well, where they are providing tutor which is placed within their office, but they have access to all regions with a screen and equipment. And that also, I mean, going back to the question you previously asked, it also deals with one, access,
Right.
and two, the security of children, three, the physical beatings which perhaps can be a little
But
challenging.
then, madam, just, you know, if I might slightly beg to differ, when
Sure.
we talk about security, I feel when you enter the cyberspace, the kind of concerns you have, I think those completely
No,
change.
that's absolutely true,
Right.
but these are monitored. These are just
Yeah.
for teaching and
So it
learning.
has to be with proper effective monitoring.
Sure.
And here I feel then again something which Ms. Fakhra also very rightly so mentioned, the parents need to be very actively involved in this whole process. On which I'll come to you, Sohail Saab, and I would want you to talk about, you know, some of the key developments that we have seen happening in Pakistan in this regard. We do understand that you worked on the development of a new national curriculum, and then again you've also been very monumental in bringing about the first ever religious education curriculum. So overall, how easy or how difficult was it to do just that? Because I'm sure, you know, tackling issues like these would also come with its own set of challenges.
Yes, you're right. That was really an important task when we developed new curriculum, the national curriculum of Pakistan, for from grade ECE to grade 12. That was a huge step because after 18th Amendment, this was the first time when all the provinces, their experts, they gathered together, and then they worked for something, the minimum standard for which they agreed upon. And then now I'm very pleased to tell you that this curriculum is being implemented in most of the parts of Pakistan. And now recently Punjab government has also approved this curriculum, the last phase 9 to 12, and in other places of Pakistan it will also be approved soon, and it's already implemented in different parts. I can tell you, alhamdulillah, we managed to do all this under the guidance of our ministers and our secretaries. They were really helpful, and here I'm really thankful to all those religious factions and their responsible people. They sent the best of their experts who not only understood religion, but also they were able to understand the demands of education, and that was a huge step. And I can tell you this will help ensuring inclusivity in the country, and it will also be a cause of bringing a good name to Pakistan on international arena.
Right, sir. But another question that I would want to put to you is the fact that we also understand that, you know, you've recently also started working this authority, which has been extremely focused so as to prioritize young people's character development too, which in itself is, of course, something very heartening and commendable to see, because we can't just expect to educate children in terms of getting good grades. We must also ideally, you know, aim to educate them so as to become better human beings per se. So with regards to this, could you please tell us that, you know, what kind of work, what kind of strategies, what kind of initiatives are there in place, and how is your authority then, of course, working so as to bring all the stakeholders to collectively work and, you know, reiterate the importance of character building, that too in young people in the country?
Yes, recently I have started working in National Rahmatul Alameen wa Khatamun Nabeen Authority, Pakistan. That was initially established through a presidential ordinance in 2021, and later on through an act of parliament that was strengthened, and it was, once again established with the name of National Rahmatul Alameen wa Khatamun Nabeen Authority. And after the appointment of Chairman Mr. Khurshid Nadeem in August 2023, we started working on different projects. Certain research works, they were initiated, and 2 of the research books are out now. They are very important addition, in the books already published on the seerah of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. But what we are focusing is on practical aspects of seerah. And then at the same time, we are working on, different workshops, seminars and conferences, and within last 7 to 8 months, we have, organized 7 to 8 conferences and seminars, and they were on very important topics. For example, we conducted a seminar on UN International Day to Combat Islamophobia, and then recently we had a seminar on Hijjatul Wida as a charter of human rights, and another one in Peshawar that was on character education. And yes, a new thing in Pakistan, for the first time on the directives of the Prime Minister, we have come up with a character education strategy for the students from grade ECE to 12, and that was developed under the supervision of Mr. Khurshid Ahmed Nadeem, the chairman of authority, and then guidance of our Secretary, Federal Education and Professional Training. So they were instrumental in getting it developed, and now we are starting implementation. And under this strategy, the students, teachers, parents, and overall society, they will all work together on the greater aspect of character building of youth, and proper implementation will start from August 2024, and hopefully that will bring a positive change, inshallah.
Right, sir. On which I would want you to add to further, because when we do talk about this, madam, do you not feel here that, then again, the media, it also assumes a lot of importance, because a lot of times you see education is something which is then just not basically limited to the 4 corners of a classroom. It also extends to what the children are learning out of school too.
I think it would be very pertinent to point out that we should see this emergency as a possibility. And having said that, we should keep focused on the fact that this is an emergency. And what does one do in an emergency? You save what is valuable and what is worth keeping. So right now we have to realign what is the purpose and aims of education.
True.
So is that education is only a painful process for a child of going through schools, then dropping out because of the very nature of schooling, and then roaming around with a degree that is of no value to that child and to the society.
True.
So I think it is imperative that as a society we decide what do we intend to give to these children, and how can we make them worthy of the future that awaits them, both national, locally, and then
internationally too.
And that's important. So I think what is imperative is that we must highlight the fact that children and all people require a certain sense of being and a certain sense of anchoring in who they are. So it is important that we just do not give them English, Urdu, math, science to study, but also those life skills and those values which are then going to make them viable citizens, good human
And we
beings.
did see this happening, madam, because quite a few years ago I remember that chapters on domestic violence, they were actually added to the curriculum per se, and then of course the importance of saying no, when we did see that a lot of child abuse cases, they did come forward. That too, this was also very
that
recent,
is-
and
that's
2-3 years
exactly
ago.
what I'm saying, the power of education. So let's use it
Exactly.
best that we can to build in value education to that, those cultural values, those norms, those good etiquettes, mannerisms and competencies that will make them useful for not only the learners but for the society as well.
Right, because that should be the ideal purpose of any education, so as to make you better human beings overall.
I'll add one
Yes,
saying
please.
over here, and that is that it's an African proverb that says it takes a village to raise a child. So I
So
think
true.
it is about time that we all realize the responsibility, collective responsibility that we have, and focus on real education instead of just giving them
Book education.
and
That's
rote
so
learning.
true. I would agree with you 100%. But coming towards you, madam, when we do talk about this, more particularly with regards to making young children more aware about our societal issues, be it that relating to gender inequality, be it that economic disparities, or for that matter even promoting interfaith harmony, so to speak, how do you propose can we then work to change our curriculum to do just that? Because curriculum is an extremely important part of educational reform.
That's a great question and a very important one, Fatma, and thank you for that. So while the curriculum is really important, the content and what is written in it really counts for something. However, what is important is, and that's something I do want to take from what Fakhra said, is that it's not enough to put that in the curriculum, but I think what is more important is the role modeling that a parent does for a child, the role modeling that the larger society does for the child. So curriculum, whatever you make, the best or the worst curriculum is not a medicine that you can just give to the child and he will imbibe or she will imbibe everything. What is important is the environment of the house, the kind of respect that your mother is getting, the way you speak to help in the house,
So true.
the way you interact with your child. Are you screaming? Are you kind? Are you being selfless in your behavior? And referring to what some of the panelists as well said, that the Prophet's Sirat was more about kindness and acceptance,
About empathy.
and empathy and tolerance. I don't even want to use the word tolerance, acceptance of a different point of view. And that's something that I feel is sadly lacking in our society, and that's something that needs to be addressed, and that I think should be part of the education emergency.
And here again, then you see the curriculum that needs to be revamped accordingly. The content representation that should be such that it equally reflects all these social issues that you've talked
yes,
about.
absolutely.
The kind of narrative that you're setting,
Yes,
that too through academic textbooks.
So
that is something
messaging
that
is
needs to
really
be given too
important.
much priority.
100%. The kind of message you are sending in the media, the kind of message you are sending through your books, the kind of message you are sending through modeling a certain behavior. These are all really important aspects. So just fixing one aspect, the curriculum, or putting in the right content may be not as effective as the society as a whole. And as she said, it takes a village. So the village needs to behave in a certain manner if they want their citizens and their young citizens to behave and come up as being good citizens in
Right, madam, your point is noted. On which, Javed Saab, I'll come to you, and moving towards the end of the show, my last question to you would be, if we are to wrap up today's conversation, what would your proposals be for reform, whether it is reform related to our current education policies, whether it is reform related to our institutional strengthening, so as to overall improve both the quality as well as the access of education in the country?
Actually, Pakistan never had a dearth of plans. What is the problem is the capability of the state to deliver on those plans, and that's a major problem. And I think that that's why there should be now a deliberate focus on implementation of Prime Minister's education emergency as well as provincial education sector plans. And for that to happen, it would be important that system leaders like chief ministers, like education ministers, they should take charge and should be able to hold regular stock takes of system leaders to kind of track progress, districts of a district, indicators after indicators, and really pushing for access and quality goals. The second is that you got to also improve the overall capability at the school level. It's important that, for example, at the school level, improve the stature of the head teacher by giving them powers and giving them money. So, if you have, as basic as these functions not fully developed at the very basic level, the aggregated problems of, number of these schools at the district and provincial level, you won't be able to deliver on that. So, my entire point is that these problems can be solved, but there's no time to just keep discussing. We just need to kind of make sure that we take one problem at a time and keep solving it, build the momentum, sustain the political will, and try to deliver, and you sustain with key set of leaders and the reform coalitions and deliver and focus on implementation of existing education emergency as well as provincial plans in place.
Right, sir, your point is noted. Coming towards you, Sohail Saban, before we conclude today's show, so my last question to you would be that we do understand that recently there has been a collaboration between Google for Education and the Ministry of Federal Education too. How can digital transformation, generally play a role in addressing the educational emergency, that too in a more perhaps effective manner, especially when it comes to bringing the out-of-school children back into schools?
Recent collaboration between Google for Education and Pakistan's Ministry of Federal Education and Professional Training is indeed a significant step towards digital transformation in the education sector of Pakistan. This partnership has the potential to play a crucial role in addressing the educational emergency, especially for out-of-school children. As you know, access to digital resources is extremely something very important. Digital platforms, they can provide access to a wealth of educational content, bridging the gap for out-of-school children who may not have access to traditional learning environments. And you're very much aware that around 26 million children are out of school in Pakistan. That's really alarming. And Google for Education that offers a range of tools and resources that can be utilized to create engaging and interactive learning experiences. And then, keeping in view the seriousness of the situation, remote learning opportunities are very important. So the collaboration facilitates this remote learning, making education accessible to children in remote and underserved areas. And with internet connectivity and digital devices, the students can participate in virtual classroom and access quality education from anywhere. And then when we come to the important segment of teacher training, here also Google for Education that can provide extensive training and support for teachers, helping them integrate technology into their teaching practices effectively. And this empowers educators to deliver high quality education and engage students more effectively. And then if we talk about, innovative learning methods, so the use of technology that introduces innovative teaching methods such as interactive simulations, virtual labs, and educational games, and this makes learning more engaging and effective. So we feel that this collaboration between Google for Education and Ministry of Federal Education and Professional Training that can drive a significant digital transforming, making education more accessible, inclusive, and effective for children of Pakistan.
That's very rightly put by yourself, sir. But in addition to that, we also do need periodic reviews and, of course, assessment to see how far have we come and what more is it that we do need to do in this regard. On which, madam, I'll come to you and I would want you to add to this further. So, overall, considering that we are moving towards the end of the show, so what would your concluding comment be when it comes to improving the level of inclusivity that we do have in Pakistan's educational system today? Generally, if you are to study stats, we understand the fact generally now they are a great greater number of PWDs, that is persons with different abilities, being enrolled in the schools. And then of course we've also seen in the recent past quite a few transgender schools have also opened up. But do you feel that this is enough, or do you feel we need to do much more if we are striving to meet our goals as per the educational emergency?
It is heartening to see. There is certainly an improvement, as I had said earlier on, but there is more that can be done, and that is that we need to provide opportunities of learning outside of the classrooms. That's where people with different abilities will shine. You know, there many a time children with, even trans children, children with other challenges and differently abled children have other talents and interests that where they can excel. And in doing so, we are not just promoting them, but we are also trying to capitalize on the different talents and capabilities. So I think this is the right time and opportunity to have data and include these children in the mainstream, not just looking at the what's learning in the classroom, but expanding the scope of learning and providing co-curricular and sports activities so that they can be at par with the other children and feel part of this initiative.
Right, and they can feel very important that way too, because you see a lot of times this has to do with the way they are dealt with in a not so pleasant manner, because you have to keep the child's right to dignity, their right to seek an education, that too in a respectful manner, that intact. Right, madam, your point is noted. Coming towards you, madam, and my last question to you before we conclude today's show is the fact, going on your international experience and of course that benefit of studying in international education institutions, how do you feel can Pakistan learn from the West or even otherwise so as to not only improve its own educational system but also to better align it as per the global standards too?
Yeah, so Fatma, I think comparing us to the Western world is a little unfair because we haven't reached that stage. But what will be more effective for us is if we look at our neighboring countries, if we look at our own region, and if we look at countries where perhaps independence happened after us. So I'll take Singapore as an example, and that's our favorite example also to give. But what they did in Singapore regarding education excellences and to bring it up to international standard was that they pumped in a lot of money. So any sector where you want a little bit of improvement, you need to pump in the right amount of money in that. Secondly, you know, informed policy making. So data based informed policy making. Third, competitive salaries. So if internationally you don't want a brain drain of your professionals and you don't want a brain drain of educationists, then you have to have competitive salaries. Fourth, what Singapore did was that they ensured that their education and teachers were not only respected, but were also trained in the best international practices.
Right.
They also went back to curriculum, reversed it, but reversed it and revised it based on the data available. So if we inculcate these few things into our learning and teaching and make it part of our emergency, I think that will benefit our country.
Madam, but in addition to that, just one thing that I would want to add is also fostering the potential of public-private partnerships, and this is something that we do see happening in UK, for example, where private firms, you know, they not only finance but they also manage the construction of schools under such partnerships. But looking at this more particularly in a South Asian context, what countries do you believe can we draw inspiration from?
I think several countries actually, they've worked very hard on their education because they know that it's the backbone of any civilization and any country. So Sri Lanka is a great example. It's a very small place. Economically, it's had its major setbacks. Politically, it's had its setbacks. But what is really you know, wonderful to see is that their literacy rate is above 94%.
Right, around 96%.
Yes, around 96%, and that's amazing. That's really if they can do it, we can certainly do it.
We can also.
And I think if we have the will, and of course, like you rightly said, that if this is an emergency situation, then we need to ensure that we take the right steps and we follow other models that have been very successful.
Right, and of course using them in our local Pakistani context, because I
Right,
think this is
right.
something which Ms. Fakhra also pinpointed
Yes.
towards, that we need to do it in our cultural and local socio-cultural context
You
too.
can't take that out.
Right. On which note I would like to conclude today's show. Thank you so much, madam.
Thank
you so much,
Thank
Ms.
you,
Mehreen. Thank you so much, Javed Saab, and thank you so much, Sohail Saab, for your precious time today. Well, to conclude today's show, we generally spoke about the current educational emergency which has been imposed in Pakistan, and of course the working of the same, that too by the Educational Task Force in this regard too. Overall, if we are serious in very effectively, imposing this educational emergency and making the most out of it, and also in the course of doing that working towards educational reform, then things that we do need to prioritize are: number one, working towards effective implementation of Article 25A of the Pakistani Constitution, working towards effective implementation of our current educational policies, having perhaps greater public-private partnerships in this regard too, and last but not the least, aiming to improve not only the level of inclusivity but also the level of accessibility of the education system, more particularly for the rural population of the country. Education is the fundamental right of every Pakistani, and ensuring that people get this right is something which is in the larger picture beneficial for the Pakistani society at large. Thank you for watching The Society. Until next time, take care and Allah Hafiz.